The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Windsor Castle, as 10-year-old Prince George walked alongside his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. The young prince wore his best navy suit, freshly pressed for the special ceremony honoring the Queen's Guard. His blonde hair was neatly combed, and his posture straight as he had been taught by his tutors. Today was different from other royal events. Today, George would witness the changing of the guard up close, something he had been looking forward to for weeks. The Queen moved with her characteristic grace, her walking stick tapping gently against the stone pathway. She had been explaining the importance of the ceremony to George as they walked. The royal guard, she told him, represented centuries of tradition and unwavering loyalty to the crown. These men stood for hours without moving, protecting the royal family and upholding the dignity of the monarchy. George listened carefully, absorbing every word his grandmother spoke. As they approached the designated viewing area, George noticed the guards standing at attention. Their red tunics were immaculate, their bearskin hats perfectly positioned, and their faces showed no emotion. The young prince had seen guards before, but never this close. He could see the determination in their eyes, the way they held their rifles with practiced precision, and how they seemed to barely breathe as they maintained their positions. The ceremony began with the familiar sound of military drums echoing through the courtyard. The incoming guard marched in perfect formation, their boots striking the ground in unison. George watched in fascination as the outgoing guards prepared to hand over their duties. The precision was remarkable. Every movement was calculated, every step purposeful. The young prince found himself counting the beats of the drums, trying to match the rhythm in his head. Among the guards taking their positions was Sergeant William Morrison, a 28-year-old soldier who had served in the Queen's Guard for 6 years. Morrison had always taken pride in his duty, but today felt especially significant. He knew the young prince would be watching, and he wanted to represent his regiment with honor. As he took his position near the main entrance, Morrison could see Prince George from the corner of his eye, standing beside the Queen with obvious excitement. The ceremony continued with speeches from military officials and the formal inspection of the guards. George remained perfectly still, showing the royal composure he had been taught from an early age. However, his young eyes were constantly moving, taking in every detail of the proceedings. He noticed how the guards never seemed to blink, how their uniforms remained perfectly straight despite the gentle breeze, and how they seemed to exist in their own world of duty and discipline. As the main ceremony concluded, the Queen began to make her way back toward the castle, greeting various officials along the way. George dutifully followed, but his attention kept drifting back to the guards who were now settling into their posts for the day. The morning ceremony was over, but their real work was just beginning. They would stand there for hours, protecting the castle and everyone inside it. The young prince had been taught about duty and service from a very early age. His parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, had explained that being royal meant serving others, putting the needs of the country before personal desires. But seeing the guards in action made these abstract concepts feel real. These men were dedicating their time, their comfort, and their energy to protect his family. The weight of that responsibility was something George was beginning to understand. Later that morning, as palace staff went about their daily routines, George found himself thinking about the guards still standing at their posts. While he attended his private lessons with his tutors, they remained outside, regardless of weather or personal comfort. During his lunch with his siblings, they continued their vigilant watch. The dedication impressed him deeply, though he kept these thoughts to himself. The afternoon brought a change in weather. Dark clouds gathered overhead and a light rain began to fall. From his classroom window, George could see the guards maintaining their positions despite the dampening conditions. Their commitment never wavered, even as palace staff hurried past with umbrellas and visitors sought shelter under covered walkways. The young prince watched Sergeant Morrison and his colleagues stand firm, their red tunics gradually darkening with moisture. As the day progressed, George's admiration for the guards grew stronger. During his afternoon break, he asked his private secretary if he could walk past the guard posts. The request was unusual but not unprecedented. Royal children often showed curiosity about palace operations. Permission was granted, with the understanding that George would maintain proper distance and decorum. Walking through the castle corridors toward the main entrance, George felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had been around important people his entire life, but there was something different about approaching the guards. These men represented something pure and uncomplicated, a straightforward dedication to duty that he found both inspiring and humbling. The young prince emerged from the castle's main entrance, immediately spotting Sergeant Morrison at his post. The guard stood perfectly still, his eyes focused straight ahead, his rifle held at precisely the correct angle. Raindrops had collected on his bearskin hat, but his expression remained unchanged. George approached slowly, maintaining the respectful distance he had been taught. For several minutes, the prince simply observed. He noticed small details that had escaped him during the morning ceremony. The way Morrison's breathing was so controlled it was barely visible, how his fingers gripped his rifle with practiced familiarity, the slight tension in his jaw that suggested concentration rather than discomfort. George began to understand that what looked like simple standing was actually an incredibly demanding physical and mental exercise. The afternoon light was fading as George continued his observation. He found himself wondering about Morrison's life outside the palace. Did he have family? What had motivated him to become a guard? How did he manage to stand so still for such long periods? These questions sparked a curiosity in the young prince that would soon lead to an unexpected interaction. The evening shadows were growing longer when Prince George made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. After watching Sergeant Morrison for nearly an hour, the young prince felt compelled to do something he had never done before. He wanted to acknowledge the guard's service in a personal way, something beyond the formal ceremonies and official recognition that these men typically received. George had been raised to understand protocol and proper behavior in every situation. He knew that guards were not supposed to interact with members of the royal family while on duty. They were trained to remain focused on their duties, maintaining their stoic presence, regardless of who passed by. But something about Morrison's unwavering dedication throughout the long, damp day had touched the 10-year-old prince in a way that formal etiquette couldn't address. The young prince looked around the courtyard. A few tourists were still taking photographs from the designated areas, and palace staff moved about their business, but no one was paying particular attention to him. His security detail maintained their discreet distance, allowing him the independence that his parents believed was important for his development. This gave George the opportunity he needed to act on his impulse. Slowly, George approached Morrison's position. The guard's training was evident in his complete stillness, but George was certain he could sense the approach. There was something almost imperceptible in Morrison's posture that suggested awareness, though his eyes never moved from their fixed point ahead. The young prince stopped about 6 feet away, close enough to be clearly visible to the guard without violating the established protocols. What happened next would be remembered by Morrison for the rest of his military career. Prince George, instead of simply walking past or observing from a distance, did something extraordinary. He removed his small navy cap and placed it over his heart in a gesture of profound respect. Then slowly and deliberately, he bowed his head toward the guard. It wasn't the formal bow he had been taught for state occasions, but something more personal, more heartfelt. The gesture lasted only a few seconds, but its impact was immeasurable. Morrison, despite his training and years of experience maintaining composure under any circumstances, felt a wave of emotion that threatened to break his professional demeanor. In all his years of service, no member of the royal family had ever acknowledged him so personally while he was on duty. The young prince's spontaneous show of respect and gratitude hit him with unexpected force. George's bow was witnessed by several people in the courtyard, though most didn't immediately understand its significance. To casual observers, it might have seemed like a young boy playing at being formal. But to those who understood royal protocol and military tradition, it was something remarkable. The future king was acknowledging the service of a common soldier in a way that transcended rank and ceremony. After raising his head, George looked directly at Morrison for just a moment. The guard's training prevented him from responding visibly, but George could see something in his eyes, a flicker of surprise, perhaps gratitude, and definitely emotion. The connection between them was brief but profound. In that instant, the young prince understood that his gesture had been received and appreciated, even though Morrison couldn't respond. The moment was interrupted by the approach of George's private secretary, who had been looking for the prince to escort him to his evening lessons. The secretary, noticing the scene, understood immediately what had occurred. As someone who had worked in the palace for many years, he recognized the significance of George's action. However, he also knew that such moments needed to be handled with discretion. "Your Royal Highness," the secretary said gently, "it's time for your evening tutorial." George nodded, replacing his cap and taking one last look at Morrison before turning to follow his escort. As they walked toward the castle entrance, the secretary made a mental note to report this incident to the appropriate palace officials. Such spontaneous acts of recognition from royal family members were rare and always noteworthy. Inside the castle, word of George's gesture began to spread quietly among the staff. The palace operated on a complex network of relationships, and communications and news of the young prince's behavior traveled quickly through appropriate channels. By dinner time, George's parents had been informed of their son's actions. Rather than concern, they felt pride in his natural instinct for recognizing service and showing respect. Meanwhile, Morrison continued his duty, but the remainder of his shift passed differently than usual. The young prince's acknowledgement had stirred something within him that he struggled to process while maintaining his professional composure. He had always taken pride in his service, but George's gesture had added a new dimension to that pride. It felt as though his dedication had been truly seen and valued, not just by his superiors or his fellow soldiers, but by the family he had sworn to protect. As the evening progressed, other guards on duty became aware of what had happened. Word spread quietly among them during brief moments when they could communicate. Morrison's experience became a source of inspiration for his colleagues. It reminded them that their service, while often unnoticed by the public, was appreciated by those who mattered most. The incident also created a small stir among the palace security team. While George's action was harmless and even admirable, it represented a deviation from normal protocol that needed to be addressed. Security officials began discussions about how to handle such situations in the future, balancing the young prince's natural instincts for kindness with the need to maintain proper procedures. That evening, as Morrison finally completed his shift and prepared to leave the palace grounds, he reflected on the day's events. The rain had stopped, and the evening air was cool and fresh. He thought about Prince George's unexpected gesture and what it meant to him personally. In a career often defined by anonymity and selfless service, the young prince's recognition felt like a gift. The other guards gathered in their changing area were eager to hear Morrison's account of the incident. As he described the moment when Prince George bowed to him, his colleagues listened with a mixture of amazement and envy. They all understood the special nature of what had occurred. It was the kind of moment that reminded them why they had chosen this path of service in the first place. As Morrison walked home that evening, he knew that Prince George's simple gesture had changed something fundamental about how he viewed his role. The young prince had reminded him that behind all the ceremony and protocol, their service was ultimately about protecting real people who genuinely appreciated their sacrifice. The news of Prince George's unexpected gesture reached the highest levels of palace administration within hours. The Queen's private secretary, Sir Edward Thornton, was among the first to receive a detailed report of the incident. As someone who had served the royal family for over 2 decades, Thornton understood the delicate balance between encouraging the young prince's natural compassion and maintaining the strict protocols that governed royal behavior. Thornton's first concern was ensuring that the incident was properly documented and assessed. He called for reports from all witnesses, including the prince's personal security detail, the guard supervisor, and several palace staff members who had observed the interaction. Each account confirmed the same basic facts. Prince George had spontaneously shown respect to Sergeant Morrison in a manner that was both touching and unprecedented. The palace communications team also became involved, recognizing that such a story, if it became public, could either enhance the royal family's reputation or create unwanted scrutiny of palace protocols. They began preparing potential responses to media inquiries while hoping the incident might remain a private matter within palace walls. The modern royal family had learned to be cautious about which personal moments should be shared with the public and which should remain private. Meanwhile, Prince George continued with his evening routine, seemingly unaware of the discussions his actions had sparked. During dinner with his siblings, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, he mentioned the guards he had observed that day, speaking about their dedication with obvious admiration. His comments were noted by their nanny, who later shared them with the children's parents as part of their regular evening reports. The Prince and Princess of Wales received the news of their son's gesture with mixed emotions. They were proud of George's instinctive kindness and respect for those who served the royal family. At the same time, they recognized the need to discuss with him the importance of following established protocols, even when his intentions were admirable. Balancing spontaneous compassion with royal duty was one of the most challenging aspects of raising future monarchs. That evening, after George's younger siblings had gone to bed, his parents asked to speak with him privately. They settled in the family's private sitting room, where many important conversations had taken place over the years. The atmosphere was warm but serious, reflecting the significance of the discussion they were about to have. "George," his father began gently, "we heard about what you did today with one of the guards. Can you tell us about it?" The young prince looked slightly nervous, wondering if he had done something wrong. He explained his actions honestly, describing how moved he had been by the guards' dedication throughout the long, rainy day. He talked about feeling that someone should acknowledge the man's service in a personal way. His mother listened carefully, recognizing in her son's words the same sense of duty and compassion that had defined her own approach to royal service. She was particularly struck by George's understanding that recognition mattered to those who served others. It showed a maturity beyond his 10 years, and suggested that he was beginning to grasp the deeper responsibilities that would one day be his. The conversation that followed was educational, rather than disciplinary. George's parents explained the various protocols that governed interactions between royal family members and palace staff. They helped him understand that while his gesture had been beautiful and meaningful, there were established ways to show appreciation that wouldn't put guards in difficult positions or create security concerns. However, they also made sure George understood that his instinct to show gratitude was exactly right. They explained that there would be many appropriate opportunities in the future for him to recognize and thank those who served the royal family and the country. Learning when and how to express appreciation was an important part of his royal education. The discussion evolved into a broader conversation about service and duty. George's parents shared stories of their own experiences recognizing the contributions of others, from military personnel to charity workers to everyday citizens who made a difference in their communities. They helped him see that showing appreciation was indeed a crucial part of royal responsibility, but it needed to be done thoughtfully and appropriately. As the conversation continued, George began to understand that his gesture, while well-intentioned, had created some complications. The guard he had honored was now in a difficult position, having been singled out for attention while on duty. Other guards might feel overlooked, and security procedures had been disrupted even briefly. These were not things George had considered in his moment of spontaneous respect. His parents assured him that no one was angry about what he had done. In fact, many people had been moved by his thoughtfulness, but they wanted him to understand that as he grew older and his public role expanded, his actions would have increasingly complex consequences. Learning to channel his good intentions through appropriate channels was part of becoming an effective royal. The conversation also touched on the broader relationship between the royal family and those who protected and served them. George learned about the long history of the Queen's Guard, their training and dedication, and the various ways the royal family traditionally showed appreciation for their service. This included formal recognition ceremonies, personal letters of commendation, and other established methods of expressing gratitude. By the end of their discussion, George had a clearer understanding of both the impact of his gesture and the importance of following proper procedures in the future. He also had a better appreciation for the complexity of royal life, where even simple acts of kindness required careful consideration. His parents were pleased to see that he grasped these concepts without losing his natural empathy and desire to help others. The next morning brought new developments in the aftermath of George's gesture. Sergeant Morrison reported for duty as usual, but found himself the subject of considerable attention from his fellow guards and superiors. While the attention was generally positive, it created an unusual dynamic that made his routine duties feel different from normal. Morrison's commanding officer, Colonel James Hartwell, called him aside for a private conversation. Hartwell had served in various capacities within the royal household for 15 years and had never encountered a situation quite like this one. He needed to ensure that Morrison understood both the honor he had received and the need to maintain normal protocols going forward. The conversation was supportive and understanding. Hartwell acknowledged that Morrison had handled the unexpected situation with perfect professionalism, maintaining his composure and duty focus despite the emotional impact of the prince's gesture. At the same time, he needed to ensure that this incident didn't create expectations for similar interactions in the future or disrupt the normal functioning of the guard unit. These behind the scenes conversations were taking place throughout the palace as administrators worked to address the various implications of George's spontaneous act of respect. As word of Prince George's gesture continued to spread within palace circles, it reached the attention of Queen Elizabeth II herself. The Queen, despite her advanced age, remained sharp and deeply involved in matters concerning her family and household. When her private secretary briefed her on the incident, she listened with the same careful attention she gave to all matters affecting the monarchy's reputation and her great-grandson's development. The Queen's initial reaction was one of quiet pride. Throughout her long reign, she had always valued genuine displays of respect and gratitude, particularly when they came from the heart, rather than from obligation. George's spontaneous bow to Sergeant Morrison reminded her of similar moments from her own childhood, when she had first begun to understand the weight of service that surrounded the royal family. However, the Queen also recognized the complexities that George's action had created. She had decades of experience managing situations where good intentions intersected with established protocols. Her wisdom came not just from her position, but from having navigated countless similar moments throughout her reign. She understood that this incident, while minor in itself, represented an important learning opportunity for her great-grandson. The Queen requested a private meeting with Prince George, something that always felt special to the young prince. These one-on-one conversations with his great-grandmother had become treasured moments in his life, opportunities to learn about royal duty from someone who had dedicated her entire life to the crown. When the meeting was arranged for the following afternoon, George felt both excited and slightly nervous. Meanwhile, the impact of George's gesture continued to ripple through the palace community. Other members of the household staff had heard about the incident, and many were touched by the young prince's instinctive kindness. Kitchen staff, housekeepers, gardeners, and administrative personnel all found themselves discussing the moment when the future king had shown such personal respect to one of their colleagues. The reaction among the staff was overwhelmingly positive, but it also highlighted some underlying tensions about recognition and appreciation within the palace hierarchy. While everyone understood that guards held a special position due to their protective role, other staff members also dedicated their lives to serving the royal family. Some quietly wondered if their own contributions were equally valued, even if they weren't acknowledged in such a public way. Sergeant Morrison himself was struggling with the attention his experience had generated. While he appreciated the recognition, he was uncomfortable being singled out from his fellow guards. The British military culture emphasized teamwork and shared sacrifice, and Morrison worried that the focus on his individual experience might create problems within his unit. He found himself hoping that the attention would fade quickly so he could return to his normal duties. The palace press office was also monitoring the situation carefully. While the incident had not yet reached public attention, they were prepared for the possibility that the story might leak to the media. Royal children's spontaneous actions often became news stories, and this particular incident had all the elements that newspapers loved: a young prince, military honor, and a touching human moment. The press officers were developing potential strategies for handling media interest if it arose. They could frame the story as evidence of George's good upbringing and natural respect for service members, or they could try to keep it private as a family matter. Much would depend on how the story might emerge and what angle the media might take if they learned about it. Queen Elizabeth's meeting with Prince George took place in her private study, a room filled with decades of royal history and personal mementos. The afternoon light filtered through tall windows as the Queen settled into her favorite chair, while George sat nearby with the respectful attention he always showed during their conversations. The Queen began by asking George to tell her about the incident in his own words. She listened without interruption as he described watching the guards throughout the day, feeling moved by their dedication, and deciding to show his appreciation in a personal way. His account was honest and thoughtful, revealing the genuine emotions that had motivated his actions. When George finished his story, the Queen smiled gently. "You showed good instincts, George," she said. "Recognizing the service of others is one of our most important duties as members of this family. However, there are proper ways to express that recognition, and part of growing up royal means learning when and how to do so appropriately." The Queen went on to share stories from her own experience, including moments when she had wanted to break protocol to show appreciation, but had learned to find appropriate alternatives. She explained that the formality of royal life wasn't meant to prevent genuine emotion or gratitude, but rather to ensure that such expressions didn't create problems for those who served the crown. She helped George understand that Sergeant Morrison, while honored by the gesture, was now in a somewhat difficult position. Other guards might feel overlooked. Security protocols had been disrupted, and the incident had created a tension that might make Morrison's future duties more complicated. These weren't consequences that George should feel guilty about, but they were important lessons for the future. The Queen also shared her perspective on the broader relationship between the royal family and their household staff. She explained that everyone who worked for the crown, from guards to gardeners, was part of an extended family of service. Showing appreciation for their dedication was indeed important, but it needed to be done in ways that supported rather than complicated their professional responsibilities. As their conversation continued, the Queen could see that George was absorbing these lessons while maintaining his natural empathy and desire to help others. This balance was exactly what she hoped to see in a future king. The ability to feel genuine gratitude and compassion while channeling those emotions through appropriate structures was essential for effective royal leadership. The Queen concluded their meeting by suggesting that George write a personal letter to Sergeant Morrison, expressing his appreciation for the Guard's service. This would allow him to communicate his gratitude in a way that was both personal and appropriate. She also mentioned that there would be future opportunities for George to participate in formal recognition ceremonies, where he could properly honor military service members. After leaving his great-grandmother's study, George felt a mixture of emotions. He was pleased that his instincts had been recognized as good, but he also felt the weight of understanding how complex royal life could be. Even simple acts of kindness required careful thought and consideration of their broader implications. That evening, George sat down to write the letter to Sergeant Morrison that his great-grandmother had suggested. The process was more challenging than he had expected. He wanted to express his genuine appreciation, while acknowledging that he understood the complications his gesture had created. With help from his parents, he crafted a thoughtful note that struck the right balance. The letter-writing process became another learning experience for George. He discovered that taking time to think through his words and consider their impact could actually make his expressions of gratitude more meaningful rather than less sincere. The formality wasn't a barrier to genuine emotion, but rather a framework for expressing it more effectively. 3 days after the incident, something unexpected happened that would change the entire dynamic of the situation. Sergeant Morrison was called to report to Colonel Hartwell's office, where he found not just his commanding officer, but also Sir Edward Thornton, the Queen's private secretary. The formal nature of the meeting made Morrison nervous. Though he had done nothing wrong and had handled the situation with Prince George perfectly, Sir Edward began the meeting by thanking Morrison for his professionalism throughout the incident and its aftermath. He explained that the royal family had been impressed not only by Morrison's dedication to duty, but also by how he had handled the unexpected attention without letting it affect his performance. This kind of steady character was exactly what the Crown valued in its service members. Then came the surprise. Sir Edward informed Morrison that he was being considered for a special assignment that would begin in several weeks. The details were still being finalized, but it would involve additional responsibilities related to royal family security during important events. This wasn't a promotion in the traditional sense, but it was recognition of his exceptional service and character. Morrison was stunned. In all his years of service, He had never imagined that a single moment of doing his job properly could lead to such recognition. He had always believed that good guards were supposed to remain invisible and unremarked upon. The idea that his dedication had been noticed and valued in such a significant way was overwhelming. Colonel Hartwell explained that the assignment would involve working with a specially selected team of guards who would provide security during high-profile royal events, including some involving international dignitaries. It was demanding work that required not only physical capability, but also the kind of emotional steadiness that Morrison had demonstrated during the incident with Prince George. Meanwhile, Prince George was experiencing his own developments related to the incident. His letter to Sergeant Morrison had been delivered through appropriate channels, and he had received a brief, formal acknowledgement in return. But more importantly, his parents had arranged for him to participate in an upcoming ceremony, recognizing various palace staff members for their service. The ceremony would be held in several weeks and would honor staff members from all departments of the royal household. George would have the opportunity to present service awards to several individuals, including guards, housekeepers, gardeners, and administrative staff. This would give him the chance to express appreciation for service in a formal, appropriate setting. Preparing for this ceremony became part of George's ongoing education in royal duties. He worked with his tutors to learn about each person he would be honoring, understanding their roles and contributions to the royal household. This research helped him appreciate the complex network of people whose dedication made royal life possible. The incident had also sparked broader discussions within the palace about how to better recognize staff contributions on a regular basis. While formal ceremonies occurred periodically, some administrators began exploring ways to ensure that dedicated service was acknowledged more consistently. Prince George's spontaneous gesture had highlighted how meaningful personal recognition could be. As the weeks passed, the attention surrounding the original incident began to fade, but its impact continued to resonate in various ways. Other members of the royal family heard about George's gesture and found themselves reflecting on their own relationships with palace staff. The incident had served as a reminder of the importance of maintaining personal connections despite the formal structures that governed royal life. Sergeant Morrison found himself changed by the experience in ways he hadn't expected. The recognition he had received, both from Prince George's original gesture and from the subsequent assignment offer, had given him a new perspective on his career. He began to see his role not just as a job, but as a genuine calling to serve something larger than himself. The other guards in Morrison's unit had also been affected by the incident. While there had been some initial concern about one member receiving special attention, the subsequent developments had actually enhanced unit morale. The fact that exceptional service could be recognized and rewarded motivated everyone to maintain the highest standards. Prince George's parents continued to use the incident as a teaching opportunity, helping him understand how his actions as he grew older would have increasingly significant impacts on others. They were pleased to see that he seemed to be learning these lessons without losing his natural empathy and desire to help others. The Queen, observing these developments, felt satisfied that a potentially challenging situation had been turned into a positive learning experience for everyone involved. She had seen many similar incidents over her long reign, and she understood that how such moments were handled often determined whether they became problems or opportunities for growth. As the date for the formal recognition ceremony approached, Prince George found himself both excited and nervous about his role. This would be one of his first times participating in an official royal duty that involved recognizing others' service. He spent considerable time preparing his remarks and practicing the proper procedures for presenting awards. The ceremony planning also provided an opportunity for George to learn about the various roles and responsibilities within the royal household. He discovered that the smooth operation of royal life depended on hundreds of people working in different capacities, each contributing their skills and dedication to the larger mission of supporting the monarchy. One aspect of the preparation that particularly impressed George was learning about the career paths of various staff members. Many had dedicated decades of their lives to royal service, advancing through different positions while maintaining their commitment to excellence. Their stories helped him understand that service to the crown was not just a job, but often a lifelong calling. The week before the ceremony, Morrison received his official assignment to the Special Security Team. The news came with detailed briefings about his new responsibilities and the additional training he would receive. While honored by the opportunity, he remained somewhat amazed that the chain of events had begun with a simple moment of a young prince showing respect for his dedication. Morrison's new assignment would involve traveling with the royal family during certain official visits and providing security during major state occasions. The work would be more varied and challenging than his regular guard duties, requiring him to adapt to different environments and situations, while maintaining the same high standards of professionalism. As both Prince George and Sergeant Morrison prepared for their respective new responsibilities, the original incident began to take on a different meaning for both of them. What had started as a spontaneous moment of recognition had evolved into opportunities for growth and service that neither could have anticipated. The day of the formal recognition ceremony arrived with crisp autumn weather and a sense of anticipation throughout Windsor Castle. Prince George woke early, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness about his first significant royal duty. This ceremony would mark a milestone in his development as a future king, demonstrating his ability to formally recognize and honor those who served the crown. The ceremony was scheduled to take place in the castle's St. George's Hall, a magnificent space that had hosted countless important events throughout British history. The hall had been carefully prepared for the occasion, with chairs arranged for the honorees and their families, and a small stage where Prince George would present the awards. The setting was formal but warm, designed to make the staff members feel genuinely honored. Prince George spent the morning in final preparations with his private secretary and protocol officers. They reviewed the list of recipients one more time, ensuring he understood each person's contributions and could speak personally about their service. The young prince had insisted on learning something specific about each honoree, rather than simply reading prepared remarks. Among the recipients was Sergeant Morrison, who would receive recognition for his exemplary service and dedication. However, the ceremony would honor many others as well. Margaret Thompson, a housekeeper who had worked at the castle for 30 years. James Patterson, a gardener whose expertise had maintained the castle grounds through multiple seasons. And Sarah Williams, an administrative assistant whose efficiency had supported numerous royal events. As the recipients and their families began arriving at the castle, there was a palpable sense of pride and excitement. Many of these staff members had worked behind the scenes for years, ensuring the smooth operation of royal life without ever expecting public recognition. For them, this ceremony represented not just personal honor but acknowledgement of the important role they played in supporting the monarchy. Sergeant Morrison arrived with his wife, Emma, and their 8-year-old daughter Lucy. Emma had heard about the incident with Prince George and was proud of how her husband had handled both the original situation and the subsequent attention. Lucy was excited about visiting the castle and meeting a real prince, though she only partially understood why her father was being honored. The ceremony began with a brief speech from Sir Edward Thornton, who spoke about the importance of dedicated service and the many ways that staff members contributed to the royal household's mission. He emphasized that while the royal family received public attention, the success of their work depended entirely on the professionalism and commitment of their staff. When Prince George took the stage, he appeared confident despite his young age. His preparation was evident in his comfortable demeanor and the genuine warmth in his voice as he began to speak. He talked about what he had learned about service through observing the staff members around him, and how their dedication inspired him to think about his own future responsibilities. The award presentations began with the longest-serving staff members. Prince George spoke personally with each recipient, sharing specific details about their contributions that showed he had taken time to truly understand their work. When Margaret Thompson received her award for 30 years of housekeeping service, George mentioned how her attention to detail had helped create a welcoming environment for countless visiting dignitaries. James Patterson, the gardener, was recognized for his role in maintaining the castle grounds through changing seasons and weather conditions. George spoke about how Patterson's work created the beautiful environment that visitors remembered long after their visits, and how the gardens provided peaceful spaces for the royal family during difficult times. When it came time to present Sergeant Morrison's award, Prince George paused for a moment before speaking. The hall was completely quiet as the young prince looked directly at Morrison, who stood at attention in his dress uniform. George spoke about the dedication he had witnessed during that rainy day several weeks earlier, and how Morrison's commitment had taught him important lessons about duty and service. "Sergeant Morrison," Prince George said, his voice clear and sincere, "your unwavering dedication to protecting our family, regardless of weather or personal comfort, represents the very best of what service means. You have shown me that true duty comes from the heart, not just from training or obligation." As George presented the award to Morrison, their eyes met briefly. In that moment, both the 10-year-old prince and the 28-year-old soldier understood that their original interaction had grown into something much larger than either had anticipated. The spontaneous gesture of respect had evolved into a formal recognition that honored not just Morrison, but all those who served with similar dedication. Morrison's wife Emma watched with tears in her eyes as her husband received the award from the young prince. She had always been proud of her husband's military service, but seeing him honored in this way made her realize how truly special his commitment was. Their daughter Lucy clapped enthusiastically, not fully understanding the significance but sensing the importance of the moment. The ceremony continued with additional presentations, each highlighting different aspects of royal household service. Sarah Williams received recognition for her administrative excellence, with George noting how her organizational skills had helped ensure the success of numerous royal events. A kitchen supervisor was honored for maintaining the highest standards during state dinners and official receptions. As the formal presentations concluded, Prince George delivered closing remarks that surprised many in attendance with their thoughtfulness and maturity. He spoke about how the ceremony had deepened his understanding of the network of dedicated people who made royal service possible. He acknowledged that while members of the royal family received public attention, the real work of supporting the monarchy was done by people like those being honored today. "Each of you has taught me something important about what it means to serve others," George said. "Your dedication helps our family fulfill our duties to the country. But more than that, you show us every day what excellence and commitment look like in practice. As I grow older and take on more responsibilities, I will remember the examples you have set." Following the formal ceremony, there was a reception where Prince George had the opportunity to meet with the recipients and their families in a more relaxed setting. These conversations gave him additional insights into the lives and motivations of those who had chosen to dedicate their careers to royal service. During his conversation with the Morrison family, George learned about Sergeant Morrison's military background and his decision to join the Queen's Guard. Morrison explained how the role had given him a sense of purpose and pride that went beyond typical military duties. He spoke about the honor of protecting the royal family and contributing to the continuity of British traditions. Emma Morrison shared her perspective on military family life and how proud she was of her husband's service. She mentioned how difficult it could be when Morrison was away for extended duties, but how the importance of his work made the sacrifices worthwhile. Their daughter Lucy asked George questions about living in a castle, leading to a charming conversation about the differences between royal life and normal family life. These personal interactions were as valuable to Prince George as the formal aspects of the ceremony. They helped him understand that behind every uniform and job title was a real person with family obligations, personal dreams, and individual motivations for choosing service. This human dimension of royal household operations was something he would carry with him as he continued to develop his understanding of leadership. As the reception concluded and families began to leave the castle, many of the honorees expressed how meaningful the ceremony had been to them. For most, it represented the first time they had been formally recognized for their contributions, and the personal attention from Prince George had made the experience especially memorable. Sergeant Morrison, as he prepared to leave with his family, reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that rainy afternoon when Prince George had bowed to him at his post. What had begun as a moment of unexpected recognition had evolved into new career opportunities and formal honors that he could never have anticipated. The ceremony also marked a significant milestone in Prince George's royal education. He had successfully conducted his first major official duty, demonstrating the composure and genuine care for others that would serve him well in his future role. His parents and great-grandmother were pleased to see that he had absorbed the lessons about appropriate recognition while maintaining his natural empathy and respect for those who served others. 6 months after the formal recognition ceremony, the effects of Prince George's original gesture continued to influence both his development and the culture within the royal household. The incident had become something of a defining moment, not just for the young prince but for everyone who had witnessed or heard about it. What had started as a spontaneous act of respect had evolved into a broader understanding of how recognition and appreciation could strengthen the bonds between the royal family and those who served them. Prince George had grown noticeably in confidence and understanding during this period. His participation in the award ceremony had been so successful that he was now regularly included in other official functions where appropriate. His parents and advisors had observed that he approached these responsibilities with both seriousness and natural warmth, suggesting that he was developing the balance necessary for effective royal leadership. The young prince had also begun to show more interest in learning about the various departments and operations within the royal household. He would often ask to visit different areas of the palace, speaking with staff members about their work and responsibilities. These informal interactions, while carefully supervised, gave George valuable insights into the complexity of royal operations and the dedication required from everyone involved. Sergeant Morrison's career had taken on new dimensions following his special assignment to the elite security team. The work was more challenging and varied than his previous duties, involving travel to different locations and adaptation to various security situations. He had excelled in his new role, demonstrating the same reliability and professionalism that had first caught Prince George's attention. Morrison's assignment had included providing security during several significant royal events, including a state visit from European dignitaries and a major charity gala attended by international celebrities. These experiences had broadened his understanding of royal duties and the various ways the monarchy engaged with the wider world. He found himself increasingly proud not just of his own service but of the institution he helped protect. The success of the staff recognition ceremony had led to changes in how the royal household approached employee appreciation. What had previously been sporadic and informal recognition was now being systematized, with regular opportunities for outstanding service to be acknowledged. This cultural shift had improved morale throughout the palace and reinforced the importance of everyone's contributions. Other members of the royal family had also been influenced by George's example. They began to show more intentional appreciation for staff contributions, though always within appropriate protocols. The incident had reminded everyone that personal recognition, when properly expressed, could have profound positive effects on those who dedicated their lives to royal service. Prince George's relationship with his great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had deepened as a result of their conversations about the incident and its aftermath. The Queen had used the situation as an opportunity to share more stories about her own experiences with service and recognition, helping George understand the historical context of his future role. These discussions had become regular parts of their time together. The Queen had been particularly pleased to see how George had handled the various lessons and opportunities that arose from his original gesture. His ability to learn from the experience while maintaining his natural compassion suggested that he was developing the wisdom necessary for effective monarchy. She began to include him in more discussions about royal responsibilities and the importance of maintaining public trust. As George's understanding of royal duty deepened, he also began to grasp the broader implications of his position. He started to ask more thoughtful questions about the monarchy's role in modern Britain and how the institution needed to evolve to remain relevant. These conversations revealed a young mind that was beginning to engage seriously with the challenges he would one day face. The staff members, who had been honored in the ceremony, continued to feel the positive effects of the recognition. Margaret Thompson, the longtime housekeeper, had been inspired to mentor younger staff members, sharing her expertise and helping maintain the high standards that had earned her recognition. Her increased visibility had also led to her being consulted on training programs for new employees. James Patterson, the gardener, had used his recognition as an opportunity to propose new conservation initiatives for the castle grounds. His ideas for sustainable gardening practices and wildlife preservation had been well received by palace administrators, leading to the implementation of several environmentally friendly improvements to the grounds. Sarah Williams, the administrative assistant, had been promoted to a supervisory role partly based on the excellence that had earned her recognition. She now helped coordinate staff recognition programs and had become an advocate for ensuring that all departments felt valued and appreciated for their contributions. The positive changes weren't limited to those who had received formal recognition. Throughout the royal household, staff members reported feeling more valued and appreciated. The knowledge that exceptional service could be noticed and honored had motivated many to strive for even higher standards in their work. Prince George's education had also been influenced by his experience. His tutors had incorporated more lessons about leadership, service, and the importance of recognizing others' contributions. He was learning about historical examples of effective leadership and how great leaders throughout history had maintained strong relationships with those who served alongside them. The incident had also affected George's relationship with his siblings. Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis had heard about their brother's experience and had begun to show their own interest in understanding the work of palace staff. The family had started including more conversations about service and appreciation in their daily interactions. As the anniversary of the original incident approached, Prince George found himself reflecting on how much had changed in his understanding of royal responsibility. The simple act of bowing to Sergeant Morrison had opened up a world of learning about leadership, recognition, and the complex relationships that made royal service possible. Looking back, both George and Morrison understood that their brief interaction had been a catalyst for growth and positive change that extended far beyond either of them individually. The young prince had learned valuable lessons about appropriate ways to show appreciation, while the sergeant had gained new opportunities and recognition for his dedication. The lasting impact of that rainy afternoon continued to influence the culture of Windsor Castle, creating an environment where service was valued, excellence was recognized, and the bonds between the royal family and their staff were stronger than ever. What had begun as one child's spontaneous gesture of respect had evolved into a model for how appreciation and recognition could enhance the effectiveness and spirit of royal service. As Prince George continued to grow and take on more responsibilities, the lessons learned from this experience would serve as a foundation for his approach to leadership. He had discovered that genuine recognition of others' contributions was not just a nice gesture, but an essential element of effective leadership that could inspire excellence and loyalty throughout any organization he would one day lead.